Steve Mallett. Hey, did you know that Steve went to high school in Spain and never even had to take Texas history? There's going to be a test later.
And Michelle Lewis, who put a hole the size of a grapefruit in the wall at our office with her head.
Well, not on purpose. I fell.
Yeah, excuses.
That's what happens when I wear nice shoes.
Yeah, that's right.
So if I wear
high heels, you blamed it on the high heels.
If I wear anything other than flip flops, I can't walk. So Steve, tell me about your experience in Spain. You grew up in Spain?
I did. I lived in Spain a total of 7 years, I think, so from 1st to 5th grade, and then we went to London for 3 years, and came back and did 9th through 11th grade, and then so I had not been back in the United States from the time I was left 1st grade until I went to my senior year in high school in Homestead, Florida. That was an eye-opener.
Wow. So your first,
years.
as a senior in high school, your first time back.
It was the first time I had been in school in the United States since I was in 1st grade.
What were some of the differences that you saw?
You know, the biggest thing was race relations. You know, I grew up on military bases with friends that were all different races and ethnicities, and we all got along great, and we didn't realize that we weren't supposed to hang out with each other. And then when I moved to Florida, which race relations in South Florida were not good. This would have been the late 70s. I had one of my good friends, Damien, was black, and him and I both took a lot of crap for that because some of the black folks didn't want him hanging out with me, and some of the white folks didn't want me hanging out with him.
So y'all moved over from Spain together, or y'all both military brats?
No. I met him in Florida, and we became friends and hung out a little bit, and he was a good guy, and I ended up graduating from Homestead High School, and but that was the biggest eye opener, and the cars were really big over here.
Really?
Because in Spain they're all Fiats and Seats, these little tiny, super small cars. Like some of them had 500cc engines in them, but it was fun. It was a good way to grow up. Got to see the world. But
when you say 500 cc's, I think, oh, that's a lot of Botox. When you say that, I don't know what that is in relation to car.
That's a really small engine. That's about 1/6 the size of the engine that's in your car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which isn't a very big engine.
See, I elementary school, I grew up down in the Rio Grande Valley.
Right.
I'm a Valley girl.
Guarita Barbie.
Guarita Barbie, that's right. And I spoke Spanish all throughout elementary school, and then I moved to Corpus and went to high school, middle school, junior high, I guess is what they called it back then. Junior high, high school, and my first year of college in Corpus, and then moved to San Antonio, and then moved to Austin. So just kind of been up the 281.
Texan, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a very lifelong
good
Texan.
For you. There's not many of you anymore, it seems.
Well, you know what? When I grew up, I remember you were telling me about stories, just kind of popping on a train and kind of traveling or exploring Europe was super cool. It was nothing for me. My experience with that was very limited and very small, but it was really nothing for us to. After church on a Sunday, we would go into Mexico and go have lunch at Arturo's and then just pop back over. It was nothing to go back and forth across the border, but I have family that live down there now, and it has gotten really, really bad.
It's changed
Very, very much.
When I was when I lived in London, we lived on the outskirts of London in a little small town, kind of like Drippin almost to London, called Ealing, and my friend Josh Wank, which that was his real last name.
I'm going to reserve.
Josh Wank. We used to get on the subway, which is called the Tube over there, and I'd get up and go meet him at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we would ride the Tube all around London and go to Trafalgar Square and Piccadilly Circus.
And how old were you?
14. 13 and 14.
Wow.
And there was no cell phones. There's no pagers. There's not even computers were just really starting to come around then. that was a long time.
There were smoke signals.
Yeah, that's right.
had to send up smoke signals.
But and then I'd come home at 7 o'clock, and sometimes I'd go to his house and call my mom and say, "Mom, can I spend the night at Josh's house?" And she'd say, "Fine." So she wouldn't see me for 2 days. I'm out riding around. Boy, we wouldn't do that now. They'd throw you in jail if you did that with your kids now.
And when you were in Spain, you spent a lot of time on the beach.
Yeah, which I didn't realize at the time how great those beaches were. So we were in South Spain, Rota Navy Base, which some of our listeners might have heard of that. It's a really big Navy base there on the south end, right before you go into the Mediterranean Sea. And beautiful white sand beaches and great surf and
Beautiful women.
Beautiful women. Yes, lots of Spanish women, which was interesting because so I could speak Spanish to Spanish women when I was.
I'm sure you could.
But
Es rico suave, Steve.
Yeah. And I was pretty good at it when I came to the States and then told people that I spoke Spanish, and I ran into people that were from Mexico.
It's very different.
I didn't understand but about every sixth word.
It's very different. My very good friend, she's from Argentina, or she's Argentinian, and her Spanish sounds more Italian, French. It's weird. It has a lot of zhush sound, very different from down in the Tex-Mex that I was used to.
Castilian Spanish is what they call it. Is very clean and crisp and precise. There's no like one word running into the next, or it's a beautiful language. But anyway, so it's been a long time. It's been 40 years since I thought I was fluent in Spanish.
Well,
but it was a lot of fun.
And my son who lived in Puerto Rico said that a lot of the Puerto Ricans he thought talked like they had marbles in their mouth.
Yeah,
he couldn't understand what they were saying.
Well, when I was in Spain, one of the things my dad took us all around Spain, and we saw so many historical sites, old Roman ruins, and the Moors came over from Africa and invaded Spain in I think the 1400s, and we got to see all that history. And so that kind of brings me to what we were going to talk about today, my love of history and the history of Dripping Springs. Some of the things that we've come up with. And I don't think a lot of people know this, but the original settlers of Dripping Springs moved here in 1853. And the story is they topped Wallace Mountain, which you drive by. Do you know where Wallace Mountain is?
No, I knew what Pulte Mountain was in High Point, which is like a big heap of trash of the construction.
No. Wallace Mountain is right across from the water tower as you crest the hill to come up into Dripping. If you look off to your left, there's a high point there. There's a cell phone tower kind of off to one side.
Really?
That's Wallace Mountain.
Well, I did not know
So that was where the first settlers settled down in Dripping Springs. And then in 1857, we got our first post office.
Yes, and that was, I guess our three settlers were the Pound families, the Moss families. Who was the other one? The Wallace family.
Wallace family.
And
Wallace Mountain,
and Moss was our first postmaster, and his wife, I think her name was Indiana, but they called her Nanny. She was
Nanny
the one
Moss,
that named Dripping Springs.
Yep.
So that's where our Dripping Springs came from.
And they're actually the original post office. The building it was in is still on Mercer Street. It's the Marshall Chapman Home Marker. I don't actually know if that's the same building, but that's where the original post office was. Right, you go. That's almost right across from City Hall on Mercer Street.
Oh,
yeah. There's a historical marker there, but
I know where that is. Now I do. I know where that is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And originally, before those settlers got here, the settlers that were here were Tonkawa Indians.
Tonkawa or Tonkawa?
Tonkawa. Yeah, Tonkawa.
I'm the dyslexic one.
That's pretty bad.
Tonkawa?
Tonkawa. I looked at the word and I was like, I've never heard that before, but I've heard of Tonkawa.
No, it's the Tonkawa now. The Tonkawa Indians.
I'm not going to edit that out. And then the last reported Indian raid was in 1872. So
we still had Indian raids here.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Boy, I bet that was pretty rough. They came from Mississippi, the original settlers, in 1853, and settled down here right where the creek runs under, right by the City Hall. That was their water source.
Was that Dripping Springs?
That was Dripping Springs.
That was Dripping Springs. And along with that, I know that the schools are all have to have the name Springs.
You were saying that, yeah. So we've got Walnut Springs, Sycamore Springs, Rooster Springs.
Cypress Springs now.
Cypress Springs.
And apparently the district schools are named after existing natural springs in the district. board policy states that district facilities may be named for local residential areas, local geographic features, or local, state, or national landmarks, and district facilities shall not be named for persons living or dead. So Rooster Springs is over the actual, not the elementary school. Rooster Springs is over by
The spring, yeah.
Polo Club, right?
That's right.
Dripping Springs is off of Mercer.
Right, you can still
You can
see
go.
it.
There's like a little.
Apparently, it doesn't flow like it used to, but yeah, that's where the water.
You said that they used to put their cheese and milk.
That's the story I heard, that they used it because the water coming out of there was cold. They would store things that were perishable in there to help them last a little bit longer.
They didn't have a Frigidaire.
They didn't have a Frigidaire in 1853.
It was a Drippin Springs. Well, so where is Sycamore and Cypress Springs? Do we know where those are?
I actually don't know. I would think Sycamore would probably be over kind of where Onion Creek is. Maybe it's that big deep water crossing that we talked about on the last podcast over off of Darden Hill. That may be what feeds.
Well, that'd be interesting. If anybody out there knows where Sycamore or
I'd
Cypress
love to hear it.
Springs.
Mallett and Michelle at gmail.com. Email us and let us know.
So do you know where Walnut Springs is? No?
I don't.
So we have three missing. Walnut, Sycamore, Cypress that we need to know.
That's right. You know what else? In 1884, so we already had a post office. We've already had a little town here. The population in 1884 was 130 people.
And they were all related.
Yeah. And then we actually didn't break the population of 1,000 until 1990. So,
oh, wow. So that's interesting.
Yeah, we've come a long way.
So the actual town of Dripping Springs right now, as we know it, do you know kind of geographically, because now we have what is called we don't have now, but we have the ETJ.
Yeah.
You can explain what that is, the
extraterritorial jurisdiction. So it's not city limits, but the city has some control over.
So I live in the ETJ, which is out Sawyer Ranch. I think it goes to Nutty Brown or a little bit further.
It's not like a circle. It goes, in some places it goes really far out of town, and some places it doesn't go very far.
Like 1826 by Texas.
It does. It goes all the way over to 1826, but I don't think it goes that far north. But I'd have to look at the map. But yeah, so they have some control over the.
So the proper Dripping Springs proper then is just.
So the last I heard, the greater Dripping Springs area, the population, we'd probably look it up, but I was thinking it was more like, population 2020. So that's 7454. That's within the city limits. I'd say the greater area, it's got to be 25,000 now.
Oh, more?
Yeah, maybe more.
Do you think? I would think more.
Maybe. I don't know. But when I moved here in 2003, the sign outside of town, I think it said it was still like less than 2,000. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So
it says that Dripping Springs population has doubled in the last 5 years.
And that was what was.
This was in 2020. So I guess this was off the last census.
Yeah. Yeah. So the town is growing. Did you know that there was a petition a few years ago to change the name of the town?
I think I voted on it.
Oh God. Yeah.
You know, I like to laugh. I think it's funny.
It was pretty funny.
I didn't take it really seriously.
There was a petition on change.org that got 331 signatures to change the name of Dripping Springs to Pound Town.
Well, why wouldn't you call it Pound Town? Because one of the founders was
I'm going
named
to Pound Town.
And apparently it ended up, they found out that it was a publicity stunt or a fundraising stunt. And
it got some traction, though.
It did. I think it got a lot of traction on Dripping Springs Neighbors. We had recently talked with Amanda Anderson, and that was pretty funny. I just remember watching all of that transpire on that page. And there were some old timers that were ticked off, how disgraceful, they didn't get the humor in it.
Yeah.
And I get it to one point, but lighten up, people. It was funny.
Could you imagine sending your Christmas cards with that return address? Send it to me, courtesy of Pound Town.
Well, you know what, Steve? Actually, when I was doing a little bit of research on this, when you look up Pound Town, it will actually pull it still up on Wikipedia.
Really?
Yeah, it will.
The story?
See, look right here on on the website. It says
Oh my
Pound
gosh.
Town. There's a website. I don't know if it's been
crazy.
hacked or,
Crazy.
but I do think it's kind of funny.
Wow. Well, we're going to talk more about the history in upcoming episodes because I'm fascinated by it, and I think there's so much to talk about here. But we have a guest coming in here in a few minutes that we met. Because how many years have we been doing portfolio at the high school?
5 years. Yes.
4 or 5 years. Where if you ever want to feel really stupid, go sit and listen to these super smart kids that our school district is pumping out and have them present their portfolios to you and tell you all the things they've done in high school. It's fascinating. And Cindy Reynolds.
She's the CTE coordinator at Drippin Springs.
She's a teacher, CTE coordinator. She works with the interns from the business department. She's going to come in and talk to us about the high school and what's going on there and some of the challenges for the